when the sky is high. No reason to stay on ground. Lift your hands and you can catch and fly.
Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix Book Review. I'm Liz Booker, and today I am doing a year in review of the Aviatrix Book Club books for 2021. And I am joined by my fellow book club host, Arhynn Descy, and I'll let Arhynn introduce herself.
Hi, it's so good to be here with you, Liz. And it's amazing that it's been a year. I'm Arhynn Descy. I am currently living in London, but I'm originally from South Africa and spend a lot of time in LA. And I'm actually chair of the LA 99s. And so it's in that capacity that the LA 99s are hosting a book club. So I'm a bit all over the world, really.
And tell me about your flying.
Right, I'm a private pilot. Over COVID, I've not done a lot of flying, but I've just got the PPL. I got it in LA. Yeah, it's a thing I did later in life. Wanted to do it for all my life, and I think I've just celebrated my 4th year anniversary of having my PPL, so it's still quite new. My day job, I'm a film composer and a producer as well, but mainly a film composer.
It's so great, and it's so indicative of sort of the breadth of experience and types of flying that for the people that you meet in the Aviatrix Book Club. That's one of the things I've loved. And for anyone who hasn't met me, I'm a retired Coast Guard helicopter pilot, and now I write full-time and host the book club and the book review website and podcast, and do some flying recreationally. I'm working on getting my flight review, just getting that started here in Florida, where it is finally cool enough to fly. So, Arhynn, we had 12 books for the year, and that's just a small sampling of the number of books that are on the market that feature women in aviation, but I tried to make it a diverse sampling. And so let's jump right in. In January, you want to introduce the book that we did for January?
It's A Chick in the Cockpit by Erica Armstrong. And this book was a memoir of her life, and what I got out of it was that book clubs are an amazing thing. But yeah,
yep, I love that you said that.
Yeah, so it was a fun one to start this entire journey with, and also indicative of the kind of subjects that we were going to tackle in our conversations, in my opinion. The difficulty that women have in general with men. Not all men. I love men, so that's not a thing. It's just that the way the world has been set up for centuries is it, makes it very difficult for women, and we've come up against that subject matter over and over and over, and this book was no exception.
Yeah, I like the way that you put that, actually. So yeah, this book is a surprise, and there are gonna be some spoilers in this because it's not obvious what this book is about. And for full disclosure, I had not read the books that we read together this year, and the same is true of next year. I've read a couple of them, but I haven't read all of them, and so some books are surprising, and this was one of them. And in preparation for this, the information is actually right on the cover. You just don't know it. The subtitle of the book is My Life Up in the Air. So it's A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. And that's a double entendre. And I wanted to actually look up the definition of double entendre before the before we started this. It is a figure of speech or a particular way of wording that is devised to have double meaning, of which one is typically obvious, whereas the other often conveys a message that would be too socially awkward, sexually suggestive, or offensive to state directly. And so the deal with this book is that the first half of it is about Erica's upcoming in aviation. And in one way, I find this book to be a great roadmap for a career in commercial aviation, because she starts off as a private pilot, gets her commercial CFI, is instructing, and works her way up through corporate aviation to the airlines, which is fantastic. Along the way, she meets a mechanic, and you see their relationship budding and blooming in the first half of this book. And then you see the sharp turn that it takes toward the end of the book. And so in another way, this book is an excellent precautionary tale about what kinds of relationships not to get into. And to your point about the challenges that women face, she approaches some of the things that she encountered as she went along, with instructors or examiners or the general public, and some of the ridiculous comments that they made. And you know what? I loved the fact that she was able to handle those with humor, and she does that in the book. And I did laugh out loud at those, even the ones that were quite appalling. But I will say that there are some underlying themes in the book that made me uncomfortable, especially as a first book for the Aviatrix Book Club, because there are some reinforcement, I felt, of some of those gender stereotypes and roles that are imposed upon us by society. And not everybody lives those, and I certainly don't. And I just wanted to read one passage from the beginning of the book, and I won't do this with all the books, but this one is one that particularly stuck out to me. And she says, this is on page 14, most girls don't aspire to be pilots, not because they can't do it, but because moving a piece of machinery through the air at a high rate of speed isn't usually high on their list of wants or desires. There aren't a lot of women pilots because not a lot of women want to be pilots. It's really that simple. If you're a woman and you want to be a pilot, you can be a pilot. Thank you, Gloria Steinem. You'll have to attain the pinpoint focus of a Buddhist monk, trade your soul for flight hours, which may be true, experience a few furloughs, sacrifice everything and everyone around you for your career, but you can be a pilot too. And not everybody reacted to that passage the same way that I did. And I do know that, with Erica's sense of humor, some things are a little tongue-in-cheek. But I just, this book is one person's unique experience, just like everybody's experience is unique. And I just don't want, I hope that people can look through that, recognize it for what it is, and then realize that there are other models on which to base your own experiences. How about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a year ago since I read it, and as you're saying things, I'm going, oh yeah, I remember that, and I remember reacting to certain, and that particular thing that you read out, I did react to that, because the whole balance of life and where you put your career and stuff like that, it's the same in any industry. It's not just particular to the aviation industry. And I faced that in film composing. It's, if you want to really make it to the top, you give up everything, but so do men. It's not just women, it's everybody who wants to. It's about dedication. So yeah, but I took it as how she speaks from her point of view as she was telling the story. So it wasn't a message for everyone. It was her way of seeing things, is how I took it.
Yeah, I agree. And as you already mentioned, it is an ode to, and now I'm going to make a gendered statement here, to the community that predominantly women create and enjoy around reading and books, which is wonderful. And, you know, she says this in our interview, that the book club are the heroes of her story. And that actually was great for a first book in a book club. So I loved it.
I'm all emotional just remembering it.
It's pretty good.
It was, it was a beautiful, beautiful start to the whole book club.
It sure was. Yeah. So on the whole, it was a great book and a good start to the book club.
Yeah.
So our second, what's that?
I apologize.
Sure.
I just was remembering what happened. So,
you know, there were a lot of emotional moments this year. I cried a lot. I cried in interviews. I cried reading the books. I'm right there with you. So
yeah.
it's pretty great. You know, if a book can do that to you, then it's doing its job.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? I'm going to just stop and say that my girlfriend wrote her literary thesis when we were in our grad school program about the point at which readers cry. And you're doing it right now. She surmised from her research that the majority of the time readers cry when the main character gets what they need. And that moment was a moment when Erica was getting what she needed. And that it's true for me. Like it's like clockwork. So
Quite a thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in February, we read The Happy Bottom Writing Club, The Life and Times of Pancho Barnes by Lauren Kessler. And this was a narrative nonfiction biography about a crazy character in our aviation history. And as I love this quote from Lauren in our interview, she said it's basically a study of an ill-behaved woman and the price one pays for being an ill-behaved woman. And to put that in context, she very clearly illustrates the ways in which this woman was bucking social norms of her time. You know, we were transitioning from the Victorian era in the early 1900s, and it opens with Pancho as a little, Florence Lowe Barnes is a little girl who spends most of her time with her grandfather. And her grandfather was sort of an early aviation pioneer. So I loved this book. It was the second book that I read about Pancho Barnes. The first one is called Pancho, and it's by Barbara Schultz, and it's an excellent book also. But I wanted to read more about her. So what were your impressions of Pancho? Had you heard of her before? And what did you think?
I had heard of her. I hadn't read anything about her, and I didn't know much about her. I kind of knew of her in relation to the Powder Puff Derby. I didn't relate to her at all. I just didn't. She was mad. She was mad, and I break rules and stuff like that. But to me, she really took it to an extreme, and it made me nervous the whole way through. She was pushing the envelope, and I kept thinking, oh my word, it was, the flying at night without knowing where they were going. It was, I think they even flew having been drinking. So
the early days of aviation.
yeah. But and then the way it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost of her. She kind of ruined her own life. It's like she just went at things to the nth degree, just didn't stop, which helped her do amazing things, but it was also the downfall of her. And that was just really nerve-wracking to read about. So but it was a fascinating book, and so many people that she knew, that she talks about, that's spoken about in there, and then you think, oh wow, were they hanging around? And even sort of the film industry and stuff, it was completely fascinating to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So for people who don't know Pancho's story, I think what she's best known for is in the title of the book, The Happy Bottom Riding Club. She was an early aviatrix and living on the West Coast in the Los Angeles area, was involved in the film industry, and actually was involved in starting it was like their union or whatever, basically banding the pilots together to get, appropriate wages for the work that they were doing in the aviation industry or in the film industry at the time. And then she went on to start a little flying club slash hotel slash bar slash maybe brothel in the Mojave Desert. And it was right there where all the Air Force pilots were doing all of their test flying and everything, basically, throughout the 50s and 60s. And she was there for all of it with Chuck Yeager and everybody. And so I think I related. First of all, I thought she would have been super fun to hang out with, like really fun drinking buddy. Secondly, I kind of related to the ways, or I admired the ways in which she was able to endear herself to men in a way that she was just one of the guys almost.
Yeah.
But also was still, kind of a player in her own right. She had quite a few hot relationships. But they always seemed to be very superficial, right? I mean, she didn't seem to really make deep connections with people, as evidenced in her relationship with her son.
Yeah, they seemed to want her for what she could give them, whether it was financial or your company or, the fun that they were having. It felt like that to me.
Yeah, same to me. And then Lauren Kessler, the author, does a great job of kind of giving us all of the information we need to make our own judgment about what kind of woman she was, including all of her financial mishandling, which turned a lot of people off. A lot of the readers in book club were not impressed with Pancho's lack of responsibility in the financial areas.
Well, I found her nerve-wracking in everything. The way she dealt with people, the relationship she jumped into, her flying, her finances, the whole lot was just nerve-wracking for me.
Yeah, it's a wild ride, that's for sure.
It really is.
All right, you want to take March?
Yeah, so in March, we read Murder in Plain Sight, which was a novel based around an aircraft mechanic, and she discovers a body in a plane that she's doing maintenance on, and that's the opening of it. It's a love story as well as being a thriller, I suppose you'd call it. It's always kind of a procedural. Because there's obviously an investigation and the police are involved, and a bit of romance thrown in. So this was a really nice light read. I think I read this one really fast, like in a couple of days or something like that, and I enjoyed it. I think I'd definitely pick up another. I think she's writing about the same character again, isn't she?
Yeah, so this book is by Julie Holmes, who herself was an aircraft mechanic and also a licensed private pilot. But this was based, this was set in the time and her experience working on the Dash 8 aircraft. And yes, so Sierra Bauer, our heroine of the story, is going to be in future books. This is a series, and Julie has other police procedurals that she'd like to write, so we're excited about those. And so you said that it opens with the mechanic Sierra Bauer finding a body on a routine maintenance inspection, and then she becomes the suspect of this murder, and in comes Detective Quinn Moore, who is now investigating her, but then
gorgeous.
I guess you could see him in your head. Yeah, so that turns into a blooming romance that heats up later in the book, along with all of the suspense and action. And there's some really great action scenes in here. There's some stuff about the aviation industry that she weaves in that is true and appalling, and really helps to move the story. And there's even a ferret. So yeah.
And there is a moment when I think we all had different moments when we figured out what was going on.
Oh, I was real. Yeah, I feel like I was really late. Like it took me really, she had me going.
Right.
Did you figure it all out at the beginning?
Yeah, there was a moment I did figure it out at one point. I went, I know what's happening. But yeah.
No, that's great. Well, she kept me going. So, some of us are quicker than others.
It's also because of being in the film industry, you understand the structure. Well, you do as a writer as well, as structuring drama and why stuff is there.
Right. Yeah. If the gun is in the first scene, then it better go off later, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I was like, this ferret better play in this book. I don't know why. I just love the ferret.
There's definitely spoilers in this conversation.
Yes, there are spoilers, but we didn't give it all away. There's plenty to figure out if you read it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on April, and in April we read an incredible book, and I'm gonna run through the whole thing just because it's just so broad. We read The Australian Women Pilots, Amazing True Stories of Women in the Air by Kathy Mexted, which is 10 biographies of women pilots throughout Australian history. And it really is a treasure trove of aviation history and so many different types of flying and aircraft. And I'm just going to read the names of the women that it's about and just a little bit about them. So first off, we have Nancy Byrd Walton, who is a pioneer Australian aviator known as the Angel of the Outback. And she was also the founder and patron of the Australian Women's Pilots Association. And in the 1930s, she became a fully qualified pilot at the age of 19 to become the youngest Australian woman to gain a pilot's license. Next is Marty Gething, who served in the Air Transport Auxiliary in the UK during World War II. Then Patricia Toole, who flew as a Bush airline pilot in Papua New Guinea, making her the first commercial pilot in the country. Gabby Kennard, the first Australian woman to fly solo around the world in 1989. Marion Mccall, the wife of the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Bunbury, who took up flying to support his travel to his parishioners, but who was also the first woman to win the International Dawn to Dusk flying competition and the first Australian to win that 3 times. Then there's Lynne Gray, who was a trans-Pacific ferry pilot who survived a forced water landing 1,000 miles off the California coast when her aircraft had an engine malfunction. Deborah Laurie, who fought the good fight on behalf of women pilots in a grueling and very public court battle to earn the equal right to fly as a commercial pilot in 1980. And Georgia Maxwell, an aerial application or crop duster pilot. Nicole Forrester, a Royal Australian Air Force jet pilot. And last but certainly not least, Esther Valdestra, a pilot for the Royal Flying Doctor Service. So really a broad range of different types of aircraft, different periods of history, and the kind of events that went on with them. So tell me what struck you about this book.
So there were 3 things. One is the story of Lynne Gray, who has the accident in the Pacific. That was terrifying and nail biting. That was a really very vivid story. That one struck me.
Me too. And you know what, I just have to give a shout out to the United States Coast Guard who were there. There was a C-130 out of Hawaii that flew on that case, and they dropped flares to provide her sort of a runway on the water so that she could make this landing as safely as possible. And I have since I read this book and talked to Kathy. I tracked down the pilots and had some emails back and forth with them. And so we got them connected so that they could talk and they could get a signed copy of the book, which is really cool.
Wow. Yeah, that was spectacular. And that's a lovely ending to that. The other one that stood out for me, the Deborah Laurie, who that battle that she fought, that was just really impressive. And it was so inspiring and so impressive what she stood for. It's very hard to stand up against so much going against you, and she really did it, which I found incredibly inspiring.
Yeah, so this is the one who fought the court battles. And this it was in the context at the same time that Australia was trying to pass its legislation for, equal opportunity for women's rights, right? And so this was like a groundbreaking, precedent-making case. And because she was successful, it has been precedent, since then. And yeah, I was on the edge of my seat. I felt horrible for her. I was grateful to her for putting herself through that on behalf of other women, because not everybody would have the fortitude to do that. It was very public and very messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And must have been personally very, very hard to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
The last, and this is a slightly fun thing, is the Marion Mccall who does the flying for her bishop husband. She did the Dawn to Dusk flying competitions, and I'd never heard of them, so I looked it up, and it's actually it was started by Prince Philip. And I think when we read this, it was the month that Prince Philip died. So for me, there was a weird synchronicity there, is that, Googling about him and it was at that time. But it's got me inspired to actually come up with a route to do myself at some point.
You're going to do it?
I'd like to, yeah. I really would like to. But you've got to make it something interesting, and it's got to make sense, and so I'm still trying to figure out what it'll be, but maybe like all the pubs of Northern England.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to hear about that trip.
No, I'll come up with something, but I've been inspired to when I have the time and the money to do that. Yeah.
That's so great. I could talk about each one of these, because like all of these women are so vivid in my mind now from reading this book. It's like they're my friends. But the one I just want to mention, the Patricia Toole story and the bush flying in Papua New Guinea, and not just her story, but also Kathy's ability to convey like the feeling of flight and the tension, when things aren't going well. And I loved that Kathy actually opens the book with her own flying experience, the fact that she started flying with her father, and I have met her virtually and know that she lives on a lovely piece of land in Australia with her own strip and hangar with her own aircraft, and I can't wait to go visit her. But she really brought her own flying experience and her writing skill to writing those scenes very vividly, cinematically for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is April, and then on to May. You want to do that one?
So May was The Woman Who Flew for Hitler, the true story of Hitler's Valkyries by Claire Mully. And oh my word, did Claire do such amazing research. Wow, it's really, really amazing research. And a very, very interesting story. So it was two women who, it's like a dual biography, Hannah Reich and Melita von Stauffenberg. one was very pro-Nazi and one was not pro-Nazi, but they both flew in the Nazi, war for different reasons, and that was absolutely fascinating to how what they achieved, but also the reasons for doing it and how they were perceived.
Claire Mully went so deep on this story, and I loved that. So this was probably one of the denser books that we read this year.
Yeah.
But again, so well researched. And for me, I've read World War II history, I've seen movies, but for me, I have noticed this about me this year, because I'm not somebody who ever went out of my way to read certainly nonfiction history. I'd read historical fiction, but nonfiction was not my thing. But this year that has changed. And I think what's happening for me is, I am starting to create this web of connection between the women who went before me and myself, my own place in history. And so I'm accessing history in a new way through this lens, and it's allowing me to appreciate it even more. And you're right. So Hannah Reich, I knew about Hannah because she is most notably the first female helicopter pilot in the world. And she flew a helicopter at a crazy demonstration indoors for Hitler. But then Melita was just such a fresh and different story. And as Claire talks about in the interview, nobody knew about her. She was not celebrated. She was kind of buried in the history because of her Jewish background and I guess, an embarrassment about it or whatever. But such a well done book. This lives vividly in my mind, and it gave me so much more information about what was going on behind the scenes in the Nazi regime that I didn't know before. So
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting thing that you said is reading these books about these women, is seeing your place in the history and in that. I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah, it's
I
definitely
love
happening.
biographies. I've read biographies for a long time, so but I must think about that. If it's doing that for me too.
It's definitely giving me a new appreciation for the form of biography and memoir too, because they were not books that I normally read before. So yeah. Did anything surprise you about either of those characters?
Well, what really caught me by surprise was that somebody Jewish did fly in Hitler's army, and I actually understand her motivations, which were basically she was looking after her family. It gave me, because I'm obsessed with Second World War. Actually, I love it. Have been since I was a teenager, and I thought I understood the German side. I realized this time reading this book that I had no idea, and it was very interesting to see it from a different perspective. That was the surprising thing for me.
Oh, say more about that. Like what specifically?
Well, I guess it's that we see the Nazis or Nazi Germany as being this block of bad.
Yeah, a monolith, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and what you get a glimpse of in this is how many people were not in agreement with the government and were actively fighting against the government, and the shades of gray. I think it's understanding those shades of gray, and then I guess it's also reflecting on the fact that pretty much, I guess, the Allies also probably have those shades of gray.
Well, of course. Yeah.
I mean, we were nowhere like the Nazis at all, but there was stuff going on.
There's always more to the story. Yeah. No, that's interesting too. Okay, so in June, we read Fly Girl by R.D. Carden, Robin Carden. So this is a novel loosely based on her personal experience as being the first woman in a corporate airline. And she has made some amalgams of characters from her own experience who feature in the book. And it basically is a book about gender discrimination and harassment and how her character deals with that. What did you think?
Well, as I said at the beginning, is that this seemed to be a theme that came up quite a lot, and in this one it was, as you say, it was front and center, was one of the main themes. I did enjoy the book, and I did like the character. Did question some of the ways she handled things, and that was interesting because when she came to our book discussion, and that was interesting to talk to her about, was why she chose to handle things in the ways that she did. Yeah, that interested me. Obviously, only she can know what effect it's really having on her life and what's best for her. And I think I'm kind of quite an ambitious person. So to me, the way she solved things was not in an ambitious way. And so that was where my questioning came in, is why? But, for a lot of people, attaining something isn't the most important thing. Maybe quality of life or other things are more important. So
Compromises, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think Robin explained it best by just sharing that, by writing fiction, you can change the ending.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that she wanted to do in this book. So for her, it was a very significant and impactful experience that's obviously has stayed with her enough to write books about it.
Yeah.
And so the main character, Tris Miles, reappears in the next two books. The next one is Angel Flight, and then her third she has not titled yet, but I know that she's getting close to finishing that one and getting ready to publish it, so I can't wait to read those books too.
Well, I've actually read Angel Flight because I was given one.
You won one, right?
I won one, or actually it was a gift from you.
It was a gift because you're a host. Yes, and I wanted to thank you for that. So
I've read it, and actually, for me, the second one I enjoyed more than the first one.
Oh, great. I'm like a quarter of the way through it, and I had to stop. So I had to stop because I was just like buried in other things, but I can't wait to get back. So in Angel Flight, in the first one, she's kind of highlighting workplace discrimination and harassment. And in the second one, she is exploring both mental health issues in aviation and women's health issues in general, and how those are handled in aviation. Am I right about that?
Yeah. And it feels, for some reason, it just feels a little more like she's in her groove on that one. So
well, I bet you the next one will be even better. So we'll look forward to that. Yeah, it was a good read. I think she handled, so you're talking overall about like how the end kind of turned out the way it was, but she did some things in that book that I really liked. She showed actual harassment, like guys coming to your hotel room door when you're on a trip, and how Tris decided to deal with that situation. And then also inappropriate behavior in the aircraft, poor decision making, and then trying to hide it, all kinds of things that happen in aviation. And in the context of the story, I thought worked really well.
Oh, they did. Yeah, they did. I've not experienced that because I only have a PPL. But so it was quite an eye-opening thing. saying that, I've heard of it in other industries as well. So it's not surprising. But what I found very surprising was that safety is compromised with stuff like that. That's worrying, actually.
Yeah, and that's an important point. The ways in which, we could talk all day long about feminism or male bashing or any of those things, or we can make a joke of the silly things people say. But the reality is it does get in the way of safety. It does get in the way of crew resource management and communication. And yeah, it's a serious issue. It's not a joke.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great book, and it was nice to shift to fiction for a little bit, especially after the density of The Women Who Flew for Hitler. So it was a little bit of a lighter read. And then where did we go after that? So that was Fly Girl in June. July, we read Danger Close: My Epic Journey as a Combat Helicopter Pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan by Amber Smith. And the title pretty much tells you what it's about. Amber was a Kiowa Warrior air helicopter pilot for the U.S. Army Cavalry, which is so badass. I mean, badass basically describes this whole book. Even like her childhood. I loved that she opens with the way that she was introduced to aviation through her family. She's got two sisters who both grew up flying with both of her parents were pilots. So they all grew up around aviation, and then they all served in one capacity or another, and they were able to meet up over there, and they all came home, most importantly, which is incredible. So, I mean, I'm a helicopter pilot, so there were a lot of ways in which I could relate to her story. And I'm also, in the military, and the Coast Guard gets about a third of its pilots from the Army. So I'm very familiar with the Army aviation culture. So there were lots of ways in which I identified with the things that she talked about in this book. The kind of feeling alienated in the community as a woman, being the only one just feeling isolated and not really connecting with other people. Them pulling pranks on you, those kinds of things, which is just an initiation. That's not necessarily a gendered thing. They initiate everybody equally, equal opportunity harassment in that regard. But yeah, it was, and then just the missions and the way that they operated on those missions. And as she says herself, the most rewarding part of that job was supporting the ground troops, which is exactly what they were there for, to make them safer, to identify threats, and to help them navigate alive out of those situations. Tell me what you thought.
Well, this was one of my favorite books this year.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. I loved the inside view of, you see movies and you see the planes or the helicopters coming over, and you don't really know. The story's never normally about the pilots, always about the foot soldiers. So it was absolutely fascinating to hear what their story was. And you're right, she was absolutely badass. Loved her. Loved how she told the story. I do enjoy stuff about Army anyway, so I knew I was going to enjoy it beforehand, because I don't know, there's a part of me that likes the Army for some reason. There's just Army and war films and stuff. So but it was also, so this is my film brain, I kept thinking, ooh, this should be a movie. Ooh, this should be a movie. It was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not to diminish the story in any way, because the story is fantastic, but I think where it misses something for the movie, writers, is the tragedy. Like, she navigated it successfully. She had some moments, and there certainly was plenty of suspense, and she was shot at, like, that was real. But like in a movie, they're going to want some dramatized tragedy to go with it. And but it would, I mean, I'd watch it for sure. Just for the badass
Put my
flying.
producer hat on and get something going.
Yeah, I'm sure she'd love that. It'd be
Yeah.
awesome. No, that was a great book, and it was really great to talk to Amber. And you know, she's out there doing public speaking, and she's on news channels commenting, you know, as a commentator for foreign policy and that kind of stuff, and for veterans issues. But this book is a whole, you know, it is very much a memoir. Beginning, you know, tells us a little bit about our childhood and introduction to aviation, and all about you know, her time in the Army, and when it was done, she came home, and then that's it. Yeah, I loved it. I'm glad you liked it too. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's surprising what you find but yeah, it's I thought I was looking forward to it, and then it didn't disappoint at all. So yeah.
That's so great. You know, that's one of the great things about this is that, and one of the things that I was trying to make sure I did was that I mean, you obviously will read anything. You're an avid reader, but not everybody has the time for that or the interest in it. And so, you know, hopefully different books appeal to different people, and they can jump in when they're excited about something and try it out. And then if they don't have time to join us later, then that's okay too.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on to August. You want to take
August, we had postcards for August.
That's right.
Postcards from the Sky, Adventures of an Aviatrix by Arhynn Descy. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but
You did.
so it was basically her memoir of learning to fly, and then she travels in it, which inspired me a lot, because I've often had at the back of my mind that I would love to do some island hopping or something, you know, go on an island hopping holiday or vacation. Sorry, you call them vacations, in an airplane. And she did that. Not island hopping specifically, but she visited islands and stuff. And it was you know, it was quite inspiring in that way. Parts of it were quite shocking. And I remember some of our guests were too shocked by it. It was very funny how personally some people took it, I thought. But yeah,
it's very, so this, I call this book a slash between a memoir of general aviation experience, travelogue, and kiss and tell. And yes, it's very racy in parts. Arhynn was in her 20s, and she was learning to fly in a civilian context. This was not for professional purposes. And the girl was having fun. Good for her. That's what I say. Yes, some of our professional pilots were like, that is inappropriate. And of course it is, in the context of like, trust me, I was not having those experiences in my military career. But good for her that she was having it in the civilian world. So
yeah,
it made me laugh.
I mean, it's a way, you know, people live their lives and stuff like that. I guess what some people were worried about was also, again, safety.
Yeah,
but
sounds like there were, she didn't come out and say it, but she definitely alluded to some things that maybe most people would consider to be a little risky.
So what some people, frankly, would do in cars. So
yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Let people use their imaginations when they read the book. It was a really fun book though. And the other things that it also, so she did talk about the fun, but also another precautionary tale for relationships not to get embroiled in, because she, you know, she learned from hers and moved on. You know, good for her. But also like the journey of aircraft ownership, and, you know, she, like, I talked to her and I made sure to make this clear when I was interviewing her, that she's not like, she wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. It's not like she was inherited a bunch of money and made all this happen, with money that was just falling out of the sky. She worked her tail off.
Yeah.
And this is how she spent her spare time and how she spent her money, and I thought that was cool. And she worked her way up to owning several different types of aircraft, and she still owns a plane and lives in New Orleans. And she's also very eclectic. She has a lot of varied interests. She's a
she cooks,
an
doesn't she? Bake or something.
She's an official, like, certified chocolate taster, which is a thing. And she is in pastry school right now, and she posts all these lovely pictures of other things that she's
no, I thought she was great. And I'd like to go to New Orleans now.
I know, me too. Maybe we can meet there and crash at her place.
That sounds good. Have some pastries while we're there too.
I know. It'll be fun to hang around with, for sure. All right. So, and she also goes to the Bahamas. And that's another important thing, I think, for pilots, like just the whole journey of going to the Bahamas solo, I thought was really interesting in the way that she did that. So, and she had some adventures there too, which was cool. So I'll take September. We're getting through it. So in September, we read a book, a young adult novel entitled Fly Girl again, but this one by Cherie L. Smith. And I actually picked this book because I wanted some diversity in terms of race in our reading. And there wasn't a lot out there to choose from. And this was a book that I had read and I knew I liked. It also incorporates a little bit of our history from World War II with the women Air Force service pilots. So this book is about a fair-skinned Black woman who passes as white to join the women Air Force service pilots and fly ferry flights and those kinds of things during World War II. And I really enjoyed it. A lot of the readers enjoyed it. What did you think?
I enjoyed it. I found the sort of the look at the wasps more closely was really interesting. I had never heard of the concept of passing prior to this book. Interestingly, there's a film out now called Passing, and it's
I saw that came out this year. Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but so I guess so for me that was fascinating, that whole thing. And actually I really felt with her, I was actually quite scared for her a lot of the time, walking that line and never knowing whether she'd be found out or not. And I think maybe it was colored for me because I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid, and I know how dangerous it was for Black people during apartheid. I saw it as a kid growing up, as a teenager, until things changed. And I saw the aggression, and I saw the violence and the complete I don't know what the word would be, where their lives could just be ruined in an instant by some idiot white person. And so I think the fear of what could happen to her was quite high in me, because I actually viscerally, if that's a word, knew what could possibly happen if she was found out. So I find myself very scared during it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially from your perspective. I mean, you read the words on the page and maybe, as an American studying our history, having read those words many times, you get desensitized a little bit to this. Same thing about wars too. Like when you read it enough times, you get a little desensitized, I think, to the reality of it. And so not only was she dealing with being a woman in aviation, but she was hiding that she had this very lethal secret. There were high stakes because she's in Texas, in Sweetwater, Texas, which is where the Wasp trained. And by the way, having read other books about the Wasp, I thought this book was really well done in terms of like putting us in the setting of the Wasp training and the other accounts that I've heard of those experiences. So I like the way that she wove that in, but also this experience of being a Black woman in the South in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And then it left us with questions. The book ended leaving us with questions that we have to finish that story in our own minds, I guess. It was really well done. And Cherie L. Smith is she's a very well-respected children's and young adult author. She has written several other books and has more on the way that feature aviation in some way, including a children's book about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I think it's called The Dragon and the Firefly, which is about a kamikaze pilot. So that one's about a male pilot, but another young adult novel. She's got this little fetish for both World War II history and aviation, which I love. So,
well, I guess so do I.
yeah, you do too. That's great. All right. In October, you want to take it?
So, Danger Close was one of my favorite, and so was this one, Open Skies, My Life as Afghanistan's First Female Pilot, by Niloufar Rahmani and Adam Sykes. So along with my love of World War II, I have developed as an adult an absolute fascination with the Middle East. And so this book I was really looking forward to, because for starters, I thought a fighter pilot in Afghanistan, a female fighter pilot in Afghanistan, to me, I never knew that it happened. And what an amazing woman, and what a story, and how inspirational. What courage it took for her to do that. I think there was a lot of sacrifice in her family so that she could do that, but it took courage on all their parts. The family, her father, wow, really supportive, amazing man. And we don't know because it's still ongoing, isn't it, the story? We don't actually know. So I found it very compelling. And again, in a weird synchronous way, we were reading that book when the US and the UK armies were pulling out of Afghanistan and everything was going crazy. So it was you picked your months, Liz.
I know, that was serendipity. And I said this to the co-author too, like, not that anybody wants it, but I mean, just the timing of the book coming out and the events, hopefully, get her story to more people. I was going to pull it out. I'm just making a mess of my pile back here. Yeah. So this book was incredible. I mean, it just, and I said this many times before, but it really puts into perspective, like we talked about the themes that would carry through the year in a lot of the books that we read about, harassment, discrimination, those kinds of things, the difficulties that women experience. This is a whole different level.
Yeah.
The things that she experienced, life-threatening, to the point that she had to leave and come to the United States and ask for asylum because her entire family was threatened. It's just so compelling, inspiring, terrifying. And yeah, you're right. It's still ongoing. I was going to try and find the year that she came here. She's granted asylum in 2019. So she's been in the US for a couple of years. She's trying to rebuild her life, rebuild her flying. and her family is off somewhere safe, we hope. And Afghanistan is a
I
mess.
got the sense that because she didn't want to say where they were, I got the sense, I don't know where I got the sense from, but that maybe they're trying to get asylum too.
I don't
but
know.
They can't say where they are.
Yeah, I don't know. But I wish her well. And I just want to give a shout out to the co-author, Adam Sykes, because this is one of those books, you know, where on the writer's side of things, so all of the interviews I did this year, there's a corresponding interview. So there's an interview about the book, and then there's a corresponding interview where we talk more deeply about writing. And, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to do is encourage more women in aviation to tell their stories through writing. But not everybody wants to spend the kind of time that it takes to learn to write well, to write fiction, and if they have a memoir that they'd like to write, they can look for help. And in this case, this was a really good pairing. And Adam Sykes did such a beautiful job helping Niloufar tell the story, and providing context, like geographical, political context to her story. It was just really well done.
Yeah, that was so. The two favorite books was that one and The Danger Close.
Well, definitely, I'm getting a sense for your taste now in books and reading.
I'm just going to confuse you next year and have completely different ones that I like.
Okay, I'm the same way. Like I don't know. I could not tell you the single thing that most appeals to me in writing, because I like a variety of books.
Yeah.
So
yeah, likewise.
But this was really, really well done. And I think everybody should read this book. Everybody, like not just pilots. I feel like this is a really illuminating book for what life is like and the stakes are like in Afghanistan. Yeah. And the context of this book is when it was occupied, and there was a little bit of a safety blanket. So you can only imagine what it feels like now. So, yeah. Next we're to November. Awesome. We're checking right along. A Spitfire Girl. And this, I want to make sure I read the whole title. A Spitfire Girl, one of the world's greatest female ATA ferry pilots, tells her story. It is about Mary Ellis, with help from author Melody Foreman. And this book, you know, these ladies who flew for the ATA, the WASP too, but the ATA, I feel like, you know, the WASP had training for their aircraft, for the most part. The ATA, they were just handed a new plane. You could go in and be flying anything. And they were like asking each other, like, how do you fly this thing? You know, tell me. They had these little crib sheets, and the sheer number of hours. This woman flew over 1,000 aircraft total, 76 different types. And if I remember correctly, Melody said she flew over 4,000 Spitfires.
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
It's because they were flying multiple ones in a day. They would head off to an airport, pick up a plane, fly to another place, then pick up another plane, fly to somewhere else. It's mind-blowing. No one really realizes that this was going on. I was having a conversation with my mother when during the time of reading this, and so obviously she's in her 80s now, and so, you know, she had no idea at all that women flew during the war at all.
Wow.
She was absolutely shocked. She kept saying, but I didn't know that. But I didn't. I was thinking, yeah. And I was telling her some of the things, you know, the fact that there were ferrying planes that, you know, that they didn't know how to fly. And I mean, she was just shocked, absolutely floored that this was a thing. So, yeah.
Well, so what did you think of Mary Ellis?
I thought she was amazing. And again, it's the courage that stands out from, you know, to the courage to do some of those things. They were flying onto airfields where the strip was not, or almost not long enough to land on. They were flying without charts. They were, you know, I mean, I pointed out that flying in the UK is difficult to navigate even with charts, because everything looks the same. The countryside looks the same. It's just all green fields. So, you know, and in wartime, they disguised a lot of stuff so that the enemy couldn't navigate. So, you know, they were flying to unknown airfields, navigating on it. It's just incredible how amazing these women were. So from that point of view, I thought she was amazing. I think I told you at the time, I really struggled to read this book.
Why was that?
I think more about how it was written than about the information. The information was interesting, but it was so for me, it was the jumping the tenses.
Like going into present tense and then going into past
Present
tense.
and past. It felt wrong, and I know it was written as Mary speaking her story.
Yeah,
that's how it was written, and so it was also then quite rambling and very hard to follow, because I think it was literally as she told it,
as Mary speaking.
Yeah,
maybe so.
I found
Yeah,
that hard.
Yeah. Well, with those questions aside, there were things that I really loved about the structure of it. I loved that the book opened with Mary flying a Spitfire. First of all, because she'd obviously been there and been doing other things first, but we open with seeing her in the action, in the briefing room, like, hey, how do you fly this thing? And going out to fly her first Spitfire. And then also, there are plenty of places in this book where we once again get to see the theme of, you know, the hardships that women face in aviation, particularly in World War II, obviously. But the thing that is fun in this book is that it kind of opens up with a little bit more lighthearted admiration for women being pilots. It you know, like a sense of pride in it. And I just love this, you know, she's talking about the sense of urgency to live, you know, during World War II, like to make the most out of life that you could, because everyone just felt like, you know, their life was in danger. And so I love this on page 6 to 7, where she says, there was this inexplicable pressure to live our lives to the maximum. There was an attitude, especially among young men, about getting your jollies while you could. And the sight of a young woman flying the sexiest icon going, the Spitfire, then that was something to be enjoyed. Absolutely. One might not get the chance again if the enemy arrived on our shores. You know, and she's like, you know, it's a sexy thing for a sexy woman to be flying a sexy plane. And I just loved that. I don't know why that isn't the attitude everywhere.
Yeah, I know that is. And she seemed, I guess the word's indomitable, is sort of that's just full of life. Nothing gets her down type of woman. Really, you know, amazing.
Yeah. Her story is amazing. And, you know, she only passed away a couple of years ago. And so she was really a treasure for the UK. And I hopefully her story gets to more people and they celebrate her even more than she has been already. She's a true hero of World War II. Yeah. And that brings us to December. You want to introduce the book?
Well, I'm still reading it.
That's okay, but you can tell us
if I can own up to that. It's The Road to Wings by Julie Tazard. And basically it's a novel. It's a lesbian romance and takes place in the Air Force during her training. I'm assuming it's only during her training because I haven't got all the way through yet. Which took place in the 90s. So yeah, I mean, it's a nice way to end the year with the romance. I'm enjoying that. And
That's great.
yeah, actually, weirdly, after having read all the memoirs this year, I keep having to remind myself this is a novel.
Well,
Thinking it's
I'm
true.
yeah, I think, the romance part of it might be fabricated, but I feel like there's a lot of accuracy in the detail, both of the flying, and this is the thing that, I mean, Julie did so well in this book, and you'll hear me say, if you listen to my interview with her, is just capturing the intensity and the high stakes of being in military flight training. And I love, the thing that I love even more about it is that not only are you getting it from the student's perspective, but because this novel is dual perspective in this very forbidden romance between a student and instructor, that you're getting it from the instructor's perspective as well. And that instructor happens to be the safety pilot. So there are all these layers of reality, of authenticity woven in to this love story. And those are just some of the things. The other important point about this book is that it is set in 1991, 92, which in terms of the evolution of gays in the military is significant because it is before the US policy that we called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was a little more permissive environment than the one in which these characters are having this relationship. And then, that went away in 2012 or something like that. So now that gays can theoretically be in the military and not encounter discrimination, although, change sometimes is slow. So it was really interesting in that way to experience those stakes as well, because that's not just, there's the high stakes of like, if you fail a flight, you're getting kicked out of flight school. If you get found out having a relationship with another woman, you're getting kicked out of the Air Force. Your career's done.
Yeah.
Or worse too, sometimes. So you're still reading it. I'll forgive you. That's because, we haven't had our end of the month 99 Los Angeles 99's book club discussion yet, which happens on Sunday, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. I'm excited about that. Thank you so much for hosting this whole year, Arhynn. It's been wonderful getting to know you and getting to know all the women, because you hold it, I think, on a weekend, and also because you hold it early in the day for American time zones. We get all these European friends on, and sometimes South Africa too. So we get to talk to these lovely ladies from a whole bunch of different countries with a whole bunch of different experience. And I love that.
I know that it's fun. I've really enjoyed the fact that it's been from all over the world.
Yeah, me too.
And I've really enjoyed getting to know you as well, and doing this whole thing. I haven't finished the book because I read fast, and so I tend to save it for the last few days of the month, so that it's fresh in my head when I'm actually talking about.
I love that. I'm kind of the same way too. I don't want to read it like 2 months prior because I'll forget all the details. And I have a huge stack of books, so I can be reading other things.
Yeah,
I do read other things, believe it or not.
Likewise. I've read a novel and a self-help, not a self-help, but sort of like an inspirational book already this month, and then this is my third book this month. So yeah,
awesome. I'm in the middle of 4 right now, so I jump around sometimes. So
I've got a lot of movies I have to watch, so I actually vote in the Oscars. So I've got
you vote in the Oscars?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Academy.
My gosh, I'm in the presence of greatness. That's so cool.
So at the moment, all the voting's happening. So there's a list of movies that I have to be watching. Literally, some weekends I'm watching 3 movies in a day. I'm not kidding.
Oh my gosh, I have to ask you, like, are you allowed to talk about this? What are are you given a list of criteria that you are specifically looking at, or is it just a broad?
So basically,
Everything?
I vote in the music categories, music and song.
Okay.
And so what they assume is that because that's what you do for a living, you have your own levels and whatever. And so, yeah, it's way more complex than I'd realized, because everybody who's eligible, every film that's eligible gets thrown in there. So you've got hundreds of films to watch. And then we've just done voting on some of the stuff down to a short list of 15. And then that gets voted down to 5. And then you have to vote for the winner. It's
Wow.
like we vote 3 times.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. I was invited into the Academy last year. So this is my second year doing this.
Wow. Sounds like a part-time job.
It's it's actually much harder work than I thought. But it's fun. I mean, how can you complain? You know, you get sent a bunch of movies, you get invited to screenings. I mean, obviously with COVID, it's been a bit of a problem, but like I went to a screening of Dune with my daughter on the weekend, and it's, you know, you get invited, there's drinks or whatever, and often Q&As with important people. That's fun.
That is fun. That sounds so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I have to divide my time between that and books.
I know. You're a busy lady. You're in high demand. I appreciate it. I appreciate you doing this so much. I appreciate your time at the book club. And I appreciate all the book club members who participated in book discussions all year long. That's the thing that makes this work. I appreciate, of course, all of the authors. We have a great list for next year. I will link a video to that preview for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. And for anybody listening on podcasts, I'll tack it on to the end of this. But Arhynn, thank you for reading with me, and thanks for talking about books. I appreciate it.
Totally my pleasure. And thank you for letting me run some discussions.
I appreciate that.